everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, here we are once again.
Here we are. No wins in the month of July, and it is August 1st as we're recording this. So happy August, Phil. Hopefully August is better to us. Leo season.
May it bring new, carry on the winds of August, new vibes. I would like to exchange these ones that we currently have because, wow. I mean, yeah, Mikka, it's like hard to even like kick this podcast off without just being, without just acknowledging like how shit it has been.
Yeah, it's been terrible.
How's life outside of Locomotive?
Fine. Yeah, I mean, same old, work, gym, eat, sleep on repeat. Just running the rat race like everyone else, I'm sure. We do have a little admin though, right?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, we do have some admin up front. So if you're finding us for the first time, you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on social media at Seriously Loco. We're on Instagram and X, which will always be known on this podcast as Twitter. I refuse to actually talk about it in that way. We will talk about tweeting. We will talk about Twitter, whatever. With that being said, though, Mikka, she logged on and got some writing done for our Patreon. And for those who haven't checked it out, Mikka, what did you cook up for the good folks, the good patrons, and now I guess live for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I did another player profile which I'm prone to do, I guess, on Patreon. This time looking at our latest signing, Jose Carrillo, who probably will become a topic of discussion tonight as he made his debut. Mixed reviews, I would say, based on what we saw. But still, a very interesting player with an interesting background, and I think his signing, when you look at the data, makes a lot of sense, just in terms of the strengths and weaknesses that he has. So, yeah, if you follow us on any of our social media, our Patreon link should be there. And if you're listening to this and you're not a patron, all good. You can still read the article. It is free now for everyone to read. But shout out to the handful of patrons that we do have that continue to contribute. Because even if we're not putting stuff on Patreon, like the patron money still pays for like the hosting and like all the podcast stuff. So we do appreciate it. But we will try to be more prolific on there. We say that all the time, but I mean, Who knows? Maybe with this poor run that Locomotive are in, that might spark something a bit more introspective in terms of writing. But I have that new piece up there, so would appreciate your eyes on it.
Yeah, it is a really good one. And like you said, Jose Carrillo, a really interesting addition, both for kind of the data purposes and for his background. I mean, just interesting in terms of profile, and maybe informative of the sort of player that Brian and company target. Kind of fits similar, like has some similar attributes to the likes of Mark Navarro, Petar Petrovic, maybe not in terms of like pedigree, but in terms of kind of lots of European experience and a little bit of an injury record, which made him available like for us and maybe taking a chance on a player with that injury record. So no, definitely check the piece out. And we do appreciate every single person who subscribes to the Patreon because like Mikka said, it does help cover some of the expenses of running a podcast, which, believe it or not free, despite the fact that most of what we do is for free, just to be super clear. So we really do appreciate all the support on Patreon. And if you're so inclined, head over that way and check it out. With that being said, I mean, Mikka, the big like soccer story right now, as it should be, like the big thing in soccer is the Women's World Cup, and I'm feeling like I want to talk about it, and at the same time, I feel a little bit robbed in this edition because these kickoff times for a working person are just like heinous in the United States.
Heinous is a good word because I've yet to see a full match, and I feel really guilty about that because I have a lot of interest in this. I mean, particularly with the Philippines making their first ever appearance in a Women's World Cup, and they won a match. So, like, to win a match in your maiden tournament, I think is huge, especially for a country, a footballing country anyway, as small as the Philippines. So, yeah, I've been really disappointed that I haven't been able to like follow it more closely. But and then of course the United States playing as well, which of course we have an interest in. Having a little bit of a rough one in the group stages.
So much discourse this morning.
A lot.
So much discourse.
I've seen like a little bit of it, but I didn't get to dive in. So yeah, no, I feel you share that same sentiment about just not being able to like fully dive in on this tournament.
And shout out to those people who like have been waking up and watching these games, or maybe even staying up and watching these games, because that is a hell of a commitment. Particularly when if you're starting work. So shout out to those who can do it. I am not one of those people that can pull an all-nighter and then like function in my job.
No.
As much as I used to think that about myself, I am not that person. Like I'm not him. So anyways, with that being said, yeah, some of the vibes around the US this morning were pretty rancid just because, you know, as is tradition with Fox soccer coverage, they reduce it down to emotions and reactions rather than talking at all about what actually happened in the match itself. So it was just a lot of fume from the likes of like Rob Stone and Carly Lloyd and these analysts saying that there were too many like smiling faces at the end of the 0-0 draw to Portugal, despite the fact that they did advance. You know, there was they were too happy. They were too, you know, it's the same sort of analysis of, is Arsenal celebrating too much?
Okay.
Or, you know, it's like, and you know, for those who cast their minds back to the previous Women's World Cup, or maybe I guess, yeah, the previous edition in 2019, when the U.S. was celebrating too much for winning 9-0 over Thailand, I believe. So it's like,
right,
damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're happy at all, you can't be happy when you win. You can't be happy when you lose, like, or when you draw and advance. So just rancid vibes around the U.S. women's national team right now. And that being said, I do think they have some concerns given the Blue Samurai going absolutely crazy. Japan with a flawless group stage.
See, another one of my like teams near and dear to my heart, going off as the men did in Qatar. So it's just, I love it. It's such a moment right now for Japanese football.
Really, really cool. So we'll keep an eye on it, even if we won't be able to keep both eyes on it in terms of watching all of the matches. But the Seriously Loco match review. All that being said, I mean, we do have to talk about what went down in Edinburgh on Saturday night. Mikka, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit like Akon right now. I'm trying to find the words to describe this team without being disrespectful.
Damn, use a train wreck. Use a train wreck.
It is getting, I mean, as we said, it's 8 now winless, four losses in that run. And this, I mean, is it unfair to say that of the run, this is the ugliest and like worst loss of the bunch? I know like the score line suggests it, but does that actually track with the performance?
You know, it's interesting because I think if you asked me this question immediately after the game, I would have been like, yes, no doubt, like absolute dog shit,
Sure.
like shocking, all those adjectives.
Yeah.
You asked me now with some time having passed, and I would still say yes, but I think also the scoreline is not. It doesn't tell you that much, actually. I mean, it doesn't tell you how we led. It doesn't tell you how we scored a wonderful team goal.
Sure.
It tells you that we lost really badly, and that,
right.
You know, if you watch the game, really we capitulated. So, yeah, I think, yes, it's still like probably the worst result in this run, but it sucks because there were like green shoots of hope that we
For
saw
sure.
and better things that we saw, and it completely just evaporated.
Yeah, I think I tend to think that the roots result is still sticking out a little bit. But I think it is almost the nature of the capitulation and really a lot of the conversation amongst us after the game, and I think on Twitter as well, just because of that's where a lot of our audience resides. A lot of the conversation there was about the mentality. And I think, you know, we've focused a lot on this team, you know, how confident they were through that strong run. We talked about it last time where it's like, where has that confidence gone? Now it feels like, you know, beyond the fact that the confidence is gone, it's like, it's so negative now. And this team like goes so quickly to like when the going gets tough, like, they just really go to that like negative place, it seems like, and just really assume, you know, it just feels, all of it kind of feels inevitable at a certain point. And that change has just felt so significant. And this match, maybe more so than like, is it the worst performance or is it the worst result? Like, it did feel like where is the bottom mentality wise for this team? Because it just like there was a point in this season where a 3rd minute penalty and I would have told you Locos win. Like I'll put everything on them seeing it out from this, you know, early lead. And this just isn't that team anymore.
No, it isn't. And it's really a difficult watch, to be honest. I mean, In this game in particular, I was looking at the players and like even when we went 2-1 up with Gomez's goal in the 16th minute, the celebration even then was kind of like muted.
Sure.
And I get that because like there was still so much football left to play. But I mean, again, with the lens of like how bad we've been, it's hard not to notice things like that and be like, does this team... Are we good? Like, do they like each other even? Like, you know what I mean? It just looks down. Like everyone looks down. Everyone looks like they don't want to be there. And I'm saying looks like, not saying they don't definitively, because no one could tell you that, right? And I doubt that because they're professionals.
Right.
But yeah, in the moment, like it's just very miserable, honestly.
Well, let's talk about the folks who were there, the guys who were in the lineup this time around. It was a little bit of a switch up from how things looked against Oakland, but in many areas of the field, particularly in attack, it had the feeling of maybe back towards, you know, first choice, although notable absence of, or I guess notable benching again of Dennis Kostishin. So it was Lucha, or well, I guess starting from the back, we had Benny, which was predictable, but then we did have a new face, as we talked about, in central defense. So Eder and Navarro started either side of Bense, and then Jose Carrillo in central defense. So debutant there, the new boy, and then a change in midfield where we speculated last week, like, is the Liam Rose injury real? it was in terms of like at least keeping him out of this one. So Chapa in for Liam next to Eric Calvillo. And then we had Petar Petrovic and Josue Aron Gomez on the wings with Ricardo Zacharias and Lucho Soloniak in the two attacking spots. You know, you could probably say that Zaka and Lucho kind of interchanged, and one was dropping deeper, like dropping off, and one was going forward, and they were kind of changing there, but ostensibly playing in a 2. So similar type of shape, the 4-4-2. And I guess, like, in terms of impact, it's probably worth talking about in the lineup. One, like, the new center back in Jose Carrillo, and then Chapa coming in for Liam, being the two more significant, I guess, decisions or forced changes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Jose Carrillo comes in, makes his debut, having signed like over a month ago. So, you know, it was a long time coming, and I think we predicted this might happen. I mean, it's a rough go to make your debut and concede 5 goals, right? I mean, we can't get away from that. I think Jose can show a lot more than he did on the night, just from watching tape of him and getting to know him through writing the piece. But of course he has to show it on the pitch, and he comes off with about an hour to go, which, you know, subbing a center back is not really that much of a thing for Brian Clarehouse. I don't know that it's happened before where it's been like unforced. But yeah, I think he was on the ball a lot more than I thought he would be as well, which I think, from what I can see, that's not his strength. He can do it, but I think Bensei's better. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And so there were a couple times that he got caught on the ball. And to be fair, the one time he did get caught on the ball, he got back and blocked what would have been an open goal. So, you know, credit where it is due, I suppose. But yeah, glad that we have that option, but it was just a rough way to introduce yourself to the Locomotive faithful, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's one of those things where with Chapa's introduction for Liam, you know, enforced by injury, it seems, because Liam didn't travel at all to RGV, and Chapa, we've talked a lot on this podcast about Chapa and the fact that, you know, obviously with him being around since season 1, he's gone through kind of an evolution of, he was very much a squad player, like getting limited minutes early on, then kind of emerged as an option in central midfield, like especially, you know, in those sort of spot starts and that sort of thing. Then we saw him deployed as an emergency right back. And I thought like acquitted himself actually quite well in a lot of those matches, despite the fact that he was not, you know, that was not his position. He wasn't like the same sort of fullback that Locomotive were used to using, but defensively like offered some solidity. Suffers a season-ending knee injury, and I think it's worth mentioning that he is kind of still returning from that injury in a lot of ways, and he just looks like, when he is out there, like he just looks like he's still getting to grips with the pace of the game. And, you know, that is, it's not disrespect to Chapa at all, who's, you know, obviously one of the, you know, he's one of the guys, like I said, who's been around since day one, local boy, worked really hard for his spot on the team, and like being tossed into this sort of like hybrid role that it took, you know, Eric and Liam quite a long time this season to figure out how this midfield pivot worked. Chapa, he's been in a couple of times now, and just whenever he's out there, it's just the drop is noticeable. And I don't think it's all down to Chapa. I think a lot of it is down to, like, we're playing this specific system that works really well for Eric and Liam, and it took them, you know, several games to figure out how it was going to work. So I think coming to grips with that has just been difficult. And unfortunately in this one, it does like directly impact the outcome, because there is, you know, at least one goal that you could likely chalk up to Chapa, unfortunately, that Locomotive concede. So there's a lot. There's a lot there, and you know, I at the risk of like digging out one player because it's absolutely like not not what we want. Like this is not a good team performance, you know, and it's worth saying that. And a couple of things about the lineup like stood out in terms of maybe setting Locomotive up for what eventually happened.
I mean, I don't think that we're gonna dig out players tonight necessarily, but I will say that I think midfield in general just had a shocker.
Yeah. Eric wasn't good either, unfortunately.
I mean, Eric Calvillo gets a yellow card and an own goal. You know what I mean? So, not a good night for him, not with his normal partner, Liam Rose, like you said. And then Chapa Herrera, I mean, adore him and what he means to the club and to the city, but he shouldn't be starting for El Paso Locomotive in 2023. And I understand that this is an enforced change because Liam Rose is injured, but I think that is kind of relevant, to my point of like the depth is not good enough. And if we can't rely on our depth to get us results, then we're not going to do much in this league. In a league where people are signing players left and right, and we've only signed one. So, you know, I don't think that is a disrespect to Chapa. I think Chapa's being set up for failure, to be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah, you alluded to the back pass that led to one of their goals, and you know, it's like you said, he's still catching up to the pace of the game, and sometimes players aren't the same after injuries like that, unfortunately. And for, you know, a utility man like that, like that's really not ideal. So midfield
Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain genuinely was like he's like the starkest example that I can think of where he was in the form of his life, like potential England selection for the World Cup, and suffers a season-ending injury in the Champions League against Roma, and essentially never returned like to the starting 11 for Liverpool.
Hector
like
Bellerin, if we'll think of an Arsenal example, I mean, should have been our right back for ages, but ACL, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, midfield just had a rough one, and you know, there's the other thing I said last time we spoke, Phil, was about team defending, and team defending was again awful. And I think we can, you know, we could chalk that up to some of the lineup changes, but also just it being awful. So
yeah. Well, talking about the way the game played out, because obviously early on, basically from the opening start, it was looking quite positive, which has been a theme for Locomotive. In this case, they do actually get a goal out of it, and it is a hashtag big switch out to the right-hand side, which is Locomotive's bread and butter, but header one in the air initially, and flicked on for Josue Aron Gomez. He runs onto it and gets in behind. Little bit of an overzealous challenge. You know, I think it's one of those where it's like, it's definitely a penalty, and like Gomez is just ensuring that it gets given, because he gets barged in the back. But he is going towards the byline, like kind of towards nothing. So I do think it's one of those where it's like, it's probably clever from Gomez, and at the same time, like it is definitely a penalty. Given that pen in the opening seconds, Lucho steps up, confidently takes it. And from there, like, I guess with the way that pen developed, it was looking like Locomotive's game plan, like at least to start, had really worked a treat.
Yeah, I think that right side, their left side, was really for the taking in those opening minutes, and actually further along in the game, actually, we just kind of stopped attacking that space. But I think the way that RGV set up allowed us those spaces, and as we've seen over the past couple weeks, it seems like Locomotive want to get to the goal with as few passes as possible, and they do that here. And like you said, I think Josue does really well to earn that penalty, get in behind. It's clever, but it's also a barge in the back by, I think, Benitez. And so, and then for Lucho Solaniak to step up and take it as confidently as he did, because he's been stuck on 8 goals for a while now. I think it was his last goal against San Antonio, something like that.
I think, wasn't his last goal a penalty as well?
I know he had that like screamer against San Antonio, and then I don't remember after that. But Either way, though, he was absolutely dying to score. And so we thought, okay, this is good. Like, let's build on this, right? We can't keep the lead.
Yeah. A pen against Vegas was Lucho's last goal prior to this. So, yeah, it's been a pretty barren run. Because, he had gone...
So I was thinking of his last open play goal then, I guess.
6 goalless.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, San Antonio away was the last open play goal for Lucho, which is pretty dire and probably tells most of the story of this run we've been on. But yeah, like you said, unable to keep the lead, and this opening goal is like kind of the starkest example. There were warning signs prior. Francois has a really good look, kind of right before this chance in the sequence, which was actually initially from like Chapa kind of plays into trouble the first time around, and then it comes back to him, and he makes a pass. He's looking for, I think, Bensay, and it's just latched onto. And I want to say it was Galindres who kind of like cuts in, latches onto the back pass, and then plays the ball across. And yeah, it's kind of easy for Davila to tap home, and just one of those that's like disappointing in how avoidable it all is. And given the fact that Locomotive take the lead in the 3rd minute to allow the equalizer in the 7th, it's like you haven't even let your goal kind of establish the any sort of air of, like basically RGV, it's as if RGV never went behind, essentially. Like you've conceded all the momentum of that early goal in such quick fashion that you've also conceded any advantage that you could have gotten from it in a pure momentum or sort of emotional sense.
I mean, when you look back at this goal, it's pretty clear that Chapa Herrera is the press trigger, and so I think I need Eder Borelli to be smarter about where he plays that ball, because he gives it to Chapa. Chapa sees himself getting closed down, gives it back. Borelli gives it back to Chapa, and now we've got 2 men pressing, one pressing Bensay and then one pressing the ball. And Chapa, of course, has no other option but to pass it back.
Right.
And, it becomes a calamity. So, I mean, I guess we have to give credit where it's due to RGV and, like, making us pay for that mistake, right? But, I mean, if I'm clipping up the video, this whole goal gets played on repeat. Like, I'd make a GIF out of it and be like, this is not good enough.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I would show a team of, like, how to press. right? And, like, but at the same time, I think we're more clever than this. I think Borelli could probably play a better ball to someone else. He has the quality to do that. I'd rather he play it up the line than play it to Chapa Herrera in that position.
And that's kind of where my mind goes, is like, because our first look from the center backs, like, or really our first look anywhere out of defense at the moment is up the line or a switch, right? So it's like, those are the first 2 looks. It's like, if those are the players we're trying to play the ball to as kind of our initial entry into the final third, with those long passes out from defense, and we are just like bypassing midfield, then like Eder is under no pressure to play a pass infield.
Right, like as a matter of like the game plan, right?
Yeah, play it to Patar, who is one of the guys that we ostensibly like want on the ball, and like the way that we play is so direct. We're not really playing out from the back. Like, we're playing out from the back in the sense that our center backs are the ones playing the big switch a lot of the time. But really, any of our defenders are like liable to hit it. Yeah,
it's not to build. Yeah, exactly. And so it's just it's avoidable, this goal, and that's what's so frustrating, I think, for fans and for the coaching staff, is like they're not working that hard for these goals.
Yeah.
So
I would say these 2 goals, like RGV's equalizer and Locomotive's second, are probably the two most infuriating moments of this game, because one is, why is this happening? And then the other is, why isn't this happening more? Like, and that is like really at the root of it. It's like in these two goals, because Locomotive's second goal, I think, like, for all of the shit we're giving the team, and like, let's be real, 5-2 in RGV, like in a match where we're really looking to break a streak and stuff, when we took the lead twice, I think we have license to give shit to the team. And this goal is really, really, it's a really good goal.
Brilliant.
And it's wonderful in its construction, and it just leaves you thinking, like, we know what this team is capable of, and this is maybe why it's so infuriating when they're just unable to kind of construct these things more with any sort of regularity.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. One touch from I think Chapa plays it to Eric, who plays it to Lucho, who plays it through to Jag, and then he's able to score a really good goal. Kind of, he's going off balance as he shoots it, so it's actually a really nice finish. Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, watch it back, and you see so much of what's good about Locomotive, of like the instinctive play and like knowing where people are, and linking like that. But just we didn't sustain it, obviously. And I don't know. I don't know how you get this team to believe in itself again. It just seems like if that's not going to do it, if like a brilliant team goal like that is not going to do it, then I don't know.
The thing that gets me about this goal too is the fact that it happens down the middle of the field. Like, it starts
where no football was being played in the middle of the field prior. Yeah.
Right. And we willingly like bypass our own midfield in build up to play the ball out wide. Like, we specifically do that all the time. And so the fact that, like, the last goal that we scored in this game came from midfielder playing the ball to a forward to forward to forward, all in central areas, like, not out wide, not a fullback, not like, it was played through midfield. It was played like, and it was on the ground, and it was like, so it's just, that's where I'm just like, you know, at a certain point, like, obviously the coaching staff has the data, like the coaching staff has all of the video, they have all of the metrics, they have everything. And at the same time, like, you can bring in the eye test and say, like, we look at our best when we have the ball down and we're playing football, because we have good players. So I just am like really coming back to, like, why do we insist on playing this super direct style when we have the footballers to play through anybody?
That's a really interesting point. And I think, like, the more that this Baron run goes on, and the more that we, like, seem to be, like, going long, I don't know. It just reminds me of something that Brian kind of said when he was first hired, in that, like, you know, I've been watching a lot of this league, and this is different. Like, there's no build up. It's all, like, run and gun. And I commend him for doing his homework on what USL Championship is like, because I don't know that we could say the same about John Hutchinson, to be honest.
Sure.
I think his tactics were incredibly naive at times, but this almost feels like
arrogant.
Yeah. This almost feels like an overcorrection. Of, like, we're playing too much USL type beat. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I tend to agree with you when we're playing with the ball on the ground, moving the ball, but also moving our opponents.
Yeah.
Things can open up. And that's what happened in the second goal. And yeah, I do think maybe it's like a slight overcorrection, and like an over adjustment maybe to the way that, like, our opponents play. Because RGV, I mean, this front three was brilliant for them. Galindres, Cabrera Jr., and Cristiano Francois, of course. Like, of course he balls out against us. Like, that just had to happen, right?
Yep.
And they were keeping the ball on the ground, and they look great. So, I don't think we can paint that broad a brushstroke of the entire league being like long ball. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't think that Brian or the coaching staff is. It just does feel a little bit like an overcorrection.
Yeah. And I mean, after that goal, I mean, it was, I don't want to say it was Locomotive's like final threat of the game, because I'm sure that's not true. Like there's chances in here that I'm not remembering. But in terms of like true danger and really moving RGV around, like this goal kind of marked the end of it. And this one, similar to the first, the lead lasted exactly 4 minutes as Davila grabbed his second of the game off a free kick. Mikka, I mean, I guess the question on this one is, well, number one, the concession of the free kick is kind of like, I remember being frustrated. I haven't seen the foul back, but I remember being frustrated with us giving the foul away in the first place. And I can't remember if it was frustration at the referee or frustration at us. But this free kick, it's one where it's like, it is good. Is it good enough that it, like, is it enough in the corner that we maybe aren't asking questions of Benny Diaz?
I think Benny Diaz has to save this. It's far out. It's like 30-something yards, well outside the D.
Yeah.
He has time to see it, and his positioning to start, first of all, he's cheating a little bit, going all the way to the right and off his line.
Yeah.
So I think maybe there was like an arrogance on his part by going that far to the left to see around the wall, or around his right, I should say, but our left. But yeah, and by the time he tries to get over, it's too late. So I have a problem with this goal being conceded, because the free kick is from so far out. Like, any professional goalkeeper should be saving this. I'm sorry.
I think to your point on the arrogance, I think Davila like catches him out a little bit, because there's a couple of people like stood over the ball, and he, I think, is assuming that because there's a right footer lined up with like a longer run up. And I think he thinks that the right footer is going to take it and bend it like outside of the wall and towards that far corner. So he's thinking like, okay, long run up. He's going to bend it, and he's kind of like setting himself for that shape, and it's going to be bending back towards him. And what actually happens is Davila takes it quickly with a short run up with his left foot, kind of flat, like towards that corner. And I think the whole thing, just like timing wise, I think Benny just misjudges it. And I don't think he's actually ready when the free kick is taken. Like, I think Davila takes it and he's like caught out a little bit. So I think Absolutely. Like it's a double kind of, it's really two things where it's like Benny's positioning and kind of how he sets up. He's really setting up for like one of the threats and not like, hey, there's multiple people over this free kick. And he's just not set when the free kick is taken, like to be able to save this, which he should have done, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, again, like he had time because of how far out this was. This is not like an absolute bullet or anything. And I guess I don't know why he wouldn't prepare for Davila to take the shot. The guy had just scored a goal.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know, but I think that he'll want that back.
Well, things go from bad to worse about 15 minutes later. A corner kick for RGV. It looked like we were initially kind of worried that Cristiano Francois had logged a goal for RGV. I mean, we talked about the narrative and how little we wanted that to happen. But the ball is swung in, and one of those where Locomotive just like, despite it seeming like a few players have a chance to deal with this corner kick coming in, it just isn't. And then when it comes to Eric Calvillo, he kind of just like, he doesn't really know what to do with this like chest high ball that's reached him. And despite the fact that there's really no one challenging him for it, it does just bounce off him and into the goal.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes these things happen where the ball, I mean, in his defense, I don't think the ball should have ever reached him. There's about like 5 Locomotive players at the front post that could have challenged for that ball and don't. But again, like it happens. Maybe Eric needs to react a little bit quicker and be a little bit more proactive or switched on. I don't know. But at the same time, like sometimes you're just unlucky. And it does bounce in like pretty much off his xiphoid process and into the net for RGV to equalize. And I don't know if I would have preferred Cristiano to score or for us to have that own goal. I prefer neither, to be fair, but yeah, sure. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I think to your point, to me, it's really reminiscent of the goal that we conceded to Oakland in that there's all these defenders like making these runs to defend a ball to the near post, and no one actually jumps or tries to cut the ball out. Like everybody just allows it to kind of pass over their heads, and no one's actually attacking the ball that ends up getting played. Like they're following their man, but they're not actually attacking the ball. Like
the only person and trying attacking to meet the ball was Benny Diaz.
Right.
Throughout the night, maybe not necessarily on this corner kick, but it's just like, why is everyone just standing there?
There's another one.
Understand it.
There's another one a few minutes later. I think it's still in the first half where they're kind of like bailed out by the fact that Benny gets fouled, but it was like Benny gets a fingertip to kind of an outswinging corner and is the only one like within, striking distance, I guess, of the ball. Like there just wasn't really anyone competing for those balls. And when, they always talk about, there's all kinds of like whatever the debates about zonal versus man marking. And that's like the most tired debate in English football, right? Like every Premier League game that you watch, like you'll hear some pundit either who hates zonal marking or says, oh, I've always liked zonal marking, whatever. All that being said, like that the biggest thing about defending set pieces is proactivity. Like,
yeah,
because if you are the defensive team and you're on your heels, like waiting for whatever to happen in front of you, you're giving every advantage like to the attacking team because they know where the ball is, where they're trying to put the ball, all that sort of stuff. So you have to, like, if you're making that run at the near post and the ball isn't floated into the middle over your head, like you have to have that proactivity of like, I'm going to attack this ball. And even if it goes behind for another corner, like I'm not letting this ball reach its intended target, and trying to meet it at the highest point, like all that sort of stuff. It just seems so basic. And right now there's such I don't know, it just feels like a hesitancy in how Locomotive defend set pieces in that it's all very passive and kind of like everybody stays on the ground. And I don't really understand, like if it had happened once, it happens, like you said, like shit happens on set pieces, and there's a reason that there's a lot of goals conceded from these sorts of situations. And
we concede from set pieces like every week.
We do it way too frequently. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. And it just feels like each time you're looking at like, okay, nobody was even like.
The thing is, when you're defending a set piece, you do have to put your body and your head where it's going to hurt. And I don't see many players in this Locomotive squad that are willing to do that at the moment. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know how that's acceptable, or sustainable. Because we keep shipping goals from set pieces. And, I've been thinking about it, and I know there's head coaches in the world's game, on bigger stages in Europe and what have you, that don't train set pieces. And they're like, sure, I trust my players to do that. But at this level, when set pieces are some teams' bread and butter, we can't be doing this. Like, we absolutely can't. Dead balls are such an important part of the game in USL Championship, even more so than in other leagues where open play goals are maybe more prolific, right? To just get a body on the ball and cause chaos, like that's USL for sure. You know what I mean? And if we're not going to be defending it, like we're going to keep losing and conceding. Yeah. And it's just so frustrating because it does look like nobody wants to hurt themselves. And I get that, but it's professional football.
No.
You got to do it. You got to put your body on the line sometimes.
Yeah, and so heading into halftime, down 3-2, having had the lead twice in the first half is just like such a gut punch, and it feels like last year, I guess in many ways, where, you know, during the run that we were having, this sort of thing just wasn't happening. In terms of, you know, conceding, like giving up leads and that sort of stuff, it just wasn't really a thing. Like Locomotive had been fighting back from a lot of deficits, which we talked about as a mentality positive, but in terms of protecting leads or failing to protect the leads, that wasn't really a thing. They go into halftime down 3-2. No changes in the early part of the half, and right on the hour mark, Wilmer Cabrera Jr. gave RGV a 2-goal lead and put them basically out of sight off the what is like a really simple like goal in its construction, which essentially like what RGV does is the ball goes into Juan Galindrez, who backs down Carrillo, I think, and then 4 Locomotive players are standing around Galindrez, and Bense joins them, like leaves Wilmer Cabrera Jr. to go mark Galindrez, and Galindrez just lays it off to the now free Cabrera, and who dispatches the finish, and the Nepo baby wheels away in celebration. But I mean, it really was like there's nothing there's nothing super special about this goal, and it feels like we just made it easy for them again, given that like Juan Galindrez does a lot of good work to keep possession and to like maintain, you know, just like to stay on the ball, but there's no reason that a player should be that free in the 18-yard box as Cabrera ended up.
There's 2 or 3 big mistakes here. First of all, shout out Wilmer Cabrera Jr., the Nepo baby, because he's absolutely making his time on the pitch count, leading the team in goals. He slaloms past Chaparrera and Eda Borelli like they're not even there. I mean, the close control on the kid is wonderful.
Yeah.
That I can sort of let go. It's everything after that is just a giant clusterfuck to me. First of all, when he gives the ball to Galindrez and Galindrez is able to hold off Carrillo, fine, I get that. You're not trying to like commit another penalty, I should say. But the fact that he's allowed to pass the ball in our box, like the guy is passing it in a telephone booth. He's surrounded by Locomotive players. Somehow still finds Wilmer Cabrera alone onside as Bense Pavkovic is raising his hand asking for offside rather than marking his man.
Yeah.
That's just poor. Like, that is so bad.
Yeah.
And then the finish, you know, left foot near post. Once again, Benny Diaz, like, you're looking at it dead on. You know, maybe he's caught out a little bit by the pace of the shot because it was like a bit of a snapshot, you know?
Yeah.
The kid is really talented, to be fair.
He is good. The Nepo baby shouts are pure, like that's just a joke.
Yeah,
that's not like he's clearly proving himself in the league, but yeah.
But I mean, it's just mistake upon mistake upon mistake. I just cannot believe Galindrez is able to pass the ball in our box.
Yeah.
Like that to me is the worst part of it all. And then Bense, of course, leaving Junior out there by himself, fully onside. Like the raising the hand for the offside stuff, just oh my god, Shkodra Mustafi vibes. I hate it. I know that it's a thing that players do, but I hate it.
The first changes for Locomotive come like kind of immediately following the goal. Like you said, Jose Carrillo's kind of dragged off for Eric McHugh, and Miles Lyons comes on for Petar Petrovic, which, I mean, let's be real, down 2 goals, like looking for a shot in the arm, all this sort of stuff. We absolutely love and have talked so highly of Eric McHugh and Miles Lyons, and they're both defenders and not the sort of player that you're looking to like bring on, you know, Miles on for Navarro that's an attacking sort of impetus change that we've seen in the past that like totally fine with that. The fact that it's, McHugh, a center back for center back change and a right back for a winger, like there's just something here that I think kind of gets at the heart of what we're now talking about, and we have been talking about for a while, which is the starting 11, when they were all playing together, when they were all clicking, is very good. And this team beyond like those 14, maybe those like top like 13, 14 guys, just doesn't have like Brian just doesn't have the options when he looks down the bench. Like the fact that there's not like a clear, hey, this guy is gonna, this attacker for Patar, like it should just be obvious, and it's just and it's just not. Like in terms of like how do I spark something, and then we don't see Dennis Kostishin until the 70th minute, and by the time that change happens, I'd argue that like their heads had dropped so much, like the game was already over.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I think the Carrillo sub right on the hour mark was probably planned. They probably didn't want to put him through.
I would say so too.
Yeah, they probably didn't want to put him through a full 90. So I guess I can kind of see that change. The Mark Navarro sub for Miles Lyons, we've seen this a lot, and I hate the feeling that we have to like manage Mark. Like he has to be one of the subs, right? And I guess in the world of 5 subs it's not a big deal, but and maybe you could argue that Miles Lyons was being brought on as a shot in the arm because he was that shot in the arm against San Antonio, right? But that was ages ago, it feels like at this point. And I mean, yeah, you probably could have replaced more of like the front line, but again, the depth is just not there. It's not there. And I think we do have to look at the players because this has happened to 2 different coaches now who with very different approaches and philosophies to everything that they do, whether it's tactics or communicating with the fans, their changes, and all of that. And I think depth has been an issue for a while now. And injuries. Yeah. I mean, we're really unlucky with injuries, and that just makes the depth issue. It brings that issue into sharper focus, unfortunately. Yeah.
So the Lions sub, it is kind of weird because he comes on for Petrovic, and then like, he is playing on the wing, I think, but then because of how things get more attacking, and he ends up he's playing on the right. I think with Navarro, so they're both playing there like for about 12 minutes or whatever before Navarro ends up eventually getting subbed for Chris Garcia. But Lyons actually ends up the furthest back of anybody, despite the fact that he was like a change for somebody, in the attack, and ends up making a challenge against Wilmer Cabrera Jr. Well, I don't know that it was Cabrera who actually won the pen, but he ends up scoring the pen. The challenge from Lyons, I mean, it's all like, obviously it's all completely moot because the result, whether it's 5-2 or 4-2, what is the quote from Oppenheimer? Like, what difference does it make if you drown in 10 feet of water or 10,000 feet of water? But the challenge itself, and I mean, USL Highlights, like, notorious for not playing replays of like potentially contentious decisions. This for me is like a super borderline penalty, and I can't really decide. Like, obviously super pedantic, not really even worth the argument because they lose either way. And I think Miles is a little hard done by this decision.
Yeah, so actually in real time, I was thinking like, oh man, it's again, they're getting done by these 1-2s between Galindrez and Cabrera.
Yeah.
Again, like allowing the pass is probably the mistake. But if you watch the replay, at least from the angle that we have, Miles appears to get the ball first. He changes the trajectory of the ball before he's ever touched Cabrera. I think what does him is the angle of the challenge.
Sure.
I think what the referee
coming
sees,
from the side there.
Yeah, the referee sees he sees the contact first, but he really should be paying attention to the ball. And Miles does change the trajectory of the ball. You see it go backwards once he slides in. So yeah, I think it is a borderline. But the fact that it was even necessary, I mean, I guess at that point we were, quote, going for it, so there was a ton of space, but the fact that he had to make that intervention is just unfortunate in the first place. And Galindras and that front three was just tearing us up all night long. I think Galindras ends up having 2 assists. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was just linking and knitting everything together, and we couldn't deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, the tail of the tape in the end, it's worth visiting some of these stats just to confirm some of the eye tests. And I mean, we have to, in the end, admit that RGV, likely deserve, more of the despite the fact that Locomotive do create 3 big chances in this one, oddly enough, 3 opta-defined big chances. They only missed 1, so the 2 that they scored, the penalty and the Gomez chance. So they only missed the 1, which wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game because at the other end, they allow 1 big chance. Basically, RGV's second, I think, is defined as a big chance, and they took it. Or their first, I should say. That being said, they create 14 shots on the night to Locomotive's 8, and 9 of those 14 shots were on target.
Dear Lord.
So you're asking, Benny Diaz, who we are even saying that maybe a couple of the goals are rough, and he makes 5 saves, which is
Wait, didn't we talk about this last time about him being under too much pressure and doing too much work?
Yeah.
So
he's been in the save of the week contest far too often. We'll talk more about the save of the week contest here in a little bit, but the reality is that he's facing too many shots. And I think it's down to the fact that it is absolutely down to the fact that we're not doing much to stop teams from creating chances against us. We used to, we talked last week about the, limiting chances, and I'd much rather have a keeper who's, bottom of the list for saves and all of that, because they're facing so few shots. It's that is the goal. Absolutely rough to give up. To give up 14 shots isn't a problem in and of itself, but for 9 of those to be on target, if we're saying that to win this game, Benny should have made 8 saves. That's crazy. You can't do that. You can't expect your goalkeeper to make 8 saves. This is not, Tim Howard versus Belgium or whatever.
Ochoa versus Brazil.
Right? No, just crazy.
Yeah.
I get, again, the story, it's one of those things it was probably a positive story at the beginning where Lucho ends the game with 3 shots. I mean, one of those being a penalty. So, 2 shots in the run of play. And then no other player had more than 1. And it's Manny, Miles Lyons, who are 2 substitutes, right? Who had shots. Gomez scored from the only shot he took in the game. Chapa has a shot, and Chris Garcia has a shot, another substitute. So actually, 3 of our 8 shots in the game were taken after we were already down at least 2. So we only had 5 shots at the time, like when the game was competitive, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, just a really, really poor night. And they're Locomotive are running the risk of people becoming uninterested. And I know that's bad to say and tough, but it's true. Not us, obviously. We're gonna trudge through this. We're here regardless. But I could just feel it in the ether. People like first there's like outrage, and then there's like acceptance, right? Like, and people start just like tuning it out. So, and with Mark Lowry coming to the SWAP on the horizon, like the narrative stew is just thickening, isn't it?
Someone put fucking cornstarch in that motherfucker, and it is thickening.
A slurry. Yeah.
Oh God, I'm dreading that game, and luckily we don't have to talk about it yet. I totally agree with you in that, like, Locomotive have to be concerned about the fact, and you know, interest and engagement and all this stuff is like so subjective and all of that. But like we've talked about from the beginning, that butts and seats is like what is ultimately going to measure success, like,
right,
for this team. Like, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, like if fireworks go off after Indy 11 and no one's there to see them, it's yeah, they have to fight their way back into relevance. And I mean, given the fact that, you know, shout out Christian, not able to join us tonight, but shout out to him. He made the pilgrimage to Austin to go see his beloved Bravos in the League's Cup, which, you know, I'll save my opinions on the League's Cup for a different day, but to go see Bravos take on Austin and come away with a 3-1 victory in Texas's capital. So, you know, in a town where if Bravos are gaining traction, like, I'm not saying it's a 0-sum game, but like Locomotive probably need to find some form here, at the risk of being passed by Mountain Star's other property. But yeah, so just a really disappointing night in Edinburgh. I don't know why I've come to expect anything else. That place is absolute, like, if there is a Locomotive hell, it is HEB Park. We have seen some of the most absurd performances there, and unfortunately, add it to the list, they still have not won. Yeah, we were so wrapped around the axle about never winning in Phoenix or never winning in New Mexico, and now look at us, just struggling in RGV. But the Seriously Loco match preview. Locomotive have another road trip, this time a little further afield coming up, and that is to the Miami FC. Mikka, I mean, how are Locomotive in their current form going to cope with Lionel Messi and company? Or is that, am I on the right? Is that the right Miami?
That's Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, that's my bad. The suburbs. No. So, yeah, Miami's other team, Tide Pod FC, whatever you want to call them. They are.
Wow, I never actually made that. Like, I knew that looked like something, but I didn't realize it was a Tide Pod. Wow.
I mean, we used to lean on away form. Has this RGV performance like flushed that mystique out the window too? With Locomotive kind of, you know, it looked like maybe we just need to get away from home because of the way that we've played at home, and then they followed up with this RGV performance. But what are you thinking about a trip out to the East Coast to the humid environs of Miami?
Yeah, I don't see us getting much joy there either. Is this not the first time we've met them in league play?
Yeah, I think this is the first one. Yeah, first meeting between the clubs.
So making a little bit of history here, the desert versus the swamp, as it were. I mean, you kind of called it, Phil. The Locomotive Twitter account was like bigging up this road record, and of course it got shattered. So, yeah, unfortunately, I just don't feel that high about Locomotive right now going into this Miami game. I mean, Miami as a side, they're pretty like middling. You know, I think they're putting together a little bit of form lately.
Sure.
3 wins, a draw, and a loss, and some decent results. I mean, they beat San Antonio, they drew Charleston. They beat Phoenix, who we know that they're not the Phoenix of old, but still. And yeah, I mean, you know, this team is absolutely in the shadows right now of Inter Miami and Lionel Messi and company. But, you know, this is I would say a historic side. I don't think that that's wrong to say. I mean, they've got a lot of history in the lower leagues, and they might feel like they've got a chip on their shoulder and want to, you know, keep performing. But yeah, I just don't see how we win.
Yeah, this is a big ask. I will say the absolute deficit of a atmosphere that Miami have. Like, I'm sure there are fans of Miami FC out there, and I don't like to crap on teams for attendance, but there's something soulless about that stadium at FIU, I think.
Yeah.
There's just something like so empty about that stadium where it feels like the fans, despite their presence, like don't have an impact on what's happening on the field. And all that being said, like, Miami have, like you said, found a little bit of a run, found a little bit of a decent run of form. You know, they lost away at Tulsa. Tulsa's in a pretty good clip. That's their only loss in the last 5. And like you mentioned, wins over Phoenix, a draw against Charleston, and a win over San Antonio, and most recently a win over Loudoun, which, I mean, you know, Loudoun they have been having a rough go of it, I think it's safe to say. But Miami have some good pieces. I wouldn't say, like you said, they're a little bit of a middling team, but there is something familiar, I guess, about how Miami line up. Watching the highlights back of Miami's win over Loudoun, it felt Locomotive-y in that they play a 4-4-2 like most often, and they really do look for kind of these balls out to the wings. They look for like these longer passes over the top, and they are very direct, which, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, in my mind, a budget, you know, if we're calling it like a budget version of what Locomotive do, then that's probably good, because like Locomotive should know how to deal with it. And at the same time, I don't trust Locomotive to actually deal with it in their current like form. They like, I just don't trust them right now.
I mean, neither do I, clearly. And I mean, we're facing another former Locomotive player, am I right? In Adrian Zendejas, who like had a very short stint, but a memorable one because he was so good for us as a goalkeeper.
Was it 3 starts, 3 clean sheets?
Yeah,
on loan.
Yes, on loan from Minnesota United, I think it was at the time. But he's had a bit of a journeyman career, and he's seemingly doing the business for Miami. So fair play to him, but allow us to score a couple, please, Adrian.
It's a weird situation where he only has 3 clean sheets this season, but he has been up for save of the week. He's kind of been similar to Benny in that he's been up for save of the week like every week. Has made some eye-catching ones, and in this case, like, despite the fact that he they don't keep a clean sheet, but he saved all of the shots he faced because the only goal that Miami conceded was an own goal.
Okay.
So he saves 5 out of 5, and it's a wicked deflection. That is the only goal he concedes. He was otherwise really great, and Loudon, like, if not for Zendejas, Loudon probably get something from this. He makes a save in about the 70th minute, where it's one of those classic, like, kind of diving high saves, like tipped onto the bar. That is really impressive. And so I am, like, in the way that Locomotive are in front of goal right now, just super goal shy. I am concerned about facing an informed goalkeeper on the road because, he was great for us. And the idea of Locomotive coming away with a goal from a guy who went 270 minutes conceding no goals for Locomotive, it just feels like that. Again, the narrative's just too strong. Like, him keeping a clean sheet against Locomotive it just feels poetic.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, Christian Sorto and oh my gosh, he was their Kyle Murphy, I think it was their top scorer last season. Also top scorer right now currently, so he's doing the business for them. I mean, there's a lot of good players in this Miami side that are, like I said, being overlooked because of the big pink shadow of Inter Miami. But I just don't see, like, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And when I say worse, I mean, I don't know, maybe a draw is what we can hope for, but I don't know. I think Miami's in a decent run of form, and it will be tough.
Yeah, they were actually able to give Kyle Murphy, well, they gave a bunch of players a rest, essentially, against Loudon, where Gustavo Ricci, I think Ben Mines, another one, Claudio Repetto, like, often a starter for Miami. So they did, like, switch things up pretty significantly in attack, and still got the job done on the road in Loudon. So yeah, Murphy will come in. He only comes in for, I think, he plays like less than 20 minutes. Same with Mines, same with Repetto. They get about a 20-minute run out. So yeah, I think that's a concern too, is, like, Locomotive tried to do that in, like, hey, we're gonna like, against lesser opposition, we're gonna do some rotation, and it hasn't been, it hasn't worked out. Like, they haven't gotten it done, and now they've been having to overutilize the guys that they've wanted to rest. So I don't know, it's not the sort of, I don't know, it's kind of giving me RGV vibes in a similar way, because it's a team that was not in good form. Like, a lot of people totally wrote off, and recently they've been good, and against some teams that Locomotive have had fits with. So it just feels like, I don't know, it just feels like another recipe for another disappointment, unfortunately. And, like, I hate being pessimistic about it, but it's just, I don't know, like, we've got to prepare our hearts for these things.
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch it. I'll watch every minute of it, but it doesn't mean I'm gonna like it.
No doubt about it. I am ready to be hurt again.
Truly.
Any thoughts from the Locomotive perspective? I mean, is there a change? Is there a shakeup? Is there anything that Brian can do to try to give Locomotive, like, the best chance they have of coming away with all three in Miami?
Jeez, I don't know. I think maybe restoring Dennis Costician to the starting lineup. I think a point has been made, and his impact is clearly better when he starts than when he comes on. So perhaps, but other than that, I mean, I don't really see any obvious changes that need to be made. I think our starting 11 picks itself when they're healthy. So it's not about X's and O's at this point. It's about mentality, and it's about having these guys get back to believing in themselves and each other because right now it seems like that's happening only in fits and starts. So we've shown that we can score first. We've shown that we can take a lead in these past 2 games. It's about actually closing that out and not being naive. So, yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily about tactics at this point.
No, that is really the tough thing is you just can't at the moment look down Locomotive's bench and see the guy who's gonna drive that difference making. I think Kostitian does need to be restored to the lineup. Beyond that, I mean, there's been mention of like they're missing Yuma's leadership and stuff like that. But I think it's worth mentioning that like Yuma has been out for a long time and did miss a majority of that winning run also, like, and that unbeaten run as well. So I hesitate to say that it is purely like a leadership thing and one guy would really shape mentality that much. And at the same time, like somebody needs to like take that mantle. Because right now, like the team is not, we talked at the beginning of the season about like suffering well or whatever, and they are not suffering well. They're suffering. They're just suffering.
Just suffering. Yeah. No, you're right. It's interesting though, because everyone on the USL show picked Locomotive to win in match week 22. So that is a bad sign.
That is a bad sign. I pick Locomotive to win because I'm a homer.
Yeah, I know. You have to. You're like contractually obligated.
I'm contractually obligated, but they are not. And that is, it is funny how sometimes reputation can shape those things where it's like, given how the season's gone so far broadly for Locomotive, you would expect them to be favorites against Miami. And given how things have gone recently, like they aren't, just objectively not favorites in anything at the moment. This season has absolutely felt like an emotional roller coaster. Started poorly, went to the point of like, are we talking about, auto lock, like potentially winning the West, like, competing with some of the best teams in the league. And since then it's fallen off, it's really fallen off. And now it's just, can they get something, like, can they get a win back on the board and get things moving in the right direction again, and create any sort of momentum towards the postseason, of which they still have a greater than 80% chance of making, given the platform that they built for themselves. But yeah, it is a really rough stretch for Locomotive. Thanks for all who are hanging in there with us, and those diehards who are gonna be here and gonna suffer with the team. With the match coming up this weekend, obviously. Well, I guess we haven't chatted about the fact we might be able to get the watch parties back rolling potentially for an away day. And with a lot of away matches in August, I think we'll be able to actually get that going again. And I'm done traveling for a little bit. So
there we go.
So yeah, hopefully we can get a watch party going. It is, with it being an East Coast away day, I'd imagine it's probably a little bit early on Saturday for Mountain Time.
Probably like 5 o'clock or something.
Yeah, it is a 5 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah, Locomotive trying to stop the skid. Miami trying to make things worse for the boys in blue. But yeah, check us out. We'll be on, if we're able to get the watch party going, we do those on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter, I think, or Facebook. I don't know. We do it on a handful of different platforms, and you can check those out. Twitch and YouTube are the fun ones because you can comment along, you can like engage with us as we go. I think Facebook allows that too. So yeah, with that, like it is really cool to be able to enjoy the game together, talk about what's going on the field, and then offer some banter and stuff, and sometimes help, ease the pain. So plan on that at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on Saturday, and hopefully we'll see you there. And we'll be talking about a big Locomotive win, maybe against all odds. And hopefully everyone has a good rest of your week. Check us out on social media. Check us out on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll talk to you after Miami. But until then, stay loco.